Hello, my name is Elowen. For most of my life, I thought silence was the price of belonging. But then I came home and found myself missing from the family photos, erased from the stories, and even written out of my father's legacy. They told me I was different. But was that the truth? Or the excuse they used to bury me? Would you stay quiet? Or would you fight to be seen? The Asheville sun had already begun to soften by the time I pulled into the gravel driveway of my mother's house. Late August heat still clung to the air, heavy with the scent of gardenias and barbecue smoke drifting from the backyard. The family reunion was already in full swing, kids shrieking in sprinklers, the occasional clink of beer bottles on the porch. I sat in the rental car for a full minute, hand gripping the key, heart thudding with that familiar mix of hope and dread. I'd flown in from Seattle that morning, arriving hours after everyone else. No one had texted to ask if I landed safely. Maybe they assumed I'd be too busy, being military and all. After 20 years in the Army, I was used to arriving in places where I didn't quite belong. Still, stepping out in my jeans and worn desert boots, I clung to a naive sliver of optimism. Maybe this time would be different. The front door creaked open before I could knock. My cousin Maddie gave me a quick hug, already halfway turned toward the kitchen. "Food's out back. Mom's got you in the guest room upstairs." Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. I stepped into the entryway and nearly tripped over a line of small sneakers. The scent of lemon polish filled the air. On the wall ahead, a massive collage of family photos caught my eye. Frames crisscrossed like a timeline. Holidays, weddings, graduations. My eyes scanned them quickly until one stopped me cold, a glossy print from Dad's retirement party 2 years ago. Everyone was there. Everyone but me. They'd rented a hall for him. Balloons, cake, speeches. I was in Afghanistan at the time, coordinating logistics for medical evacuation flights. I remembered FaceTiming Mom that night, the lag making her smile glitch as she showed me the decorations. She never mentioned a photographer, or that a group photo was taken, or that it would be printed, framed, and hung at eye level in the front hall for every visitor to see. I smiled as if it didn't matter, though something in my chest quietly folded in on itself. In the kitchen, Mom was narrating her usual roll call of familial greatness. Callista just got promoted at her firm. Bryn's wedding's next month. You should see the ring. She turned to me, gesturing with a deviled egg. And Elowen, she's out west, writing, I think? I let out a practiced chuckle. Something like that. Nobody made eye contact. I'd written a memoir. It was shortlisted for a national award. The VA invited me to speak at their annual conference. But in this kitchen, none of it mattered. In this kitchen, I was still the girl who chose camouflage over college, war zones over weddings. I poured myself a lemonade and wandered out back, hoping for a reset. A niece I didn't recognize darted past me with a water gun. I bent to say hello, but she was already gone. In the kitchen, I'd offered to help. Mom told me to organize the plastic cutlery. I did, carefully laying out knives, forks, and spoons on a paper napkin. No one noticed. Later, I found a squeaky folding chair under the porch fan and sat alone, watching the shadows grow long across the yard. Laughter erupted periodically from the main table. None of it reached me. That night, I lay awake in the floral guest room, the hum of the ceiling fan masking the soft chatter downstairs. I opened my notebook, my comfort, and wrote, "Why am I here if I'm invisible?" As if in answer, laughter roared up through the floorboards. I tiptoed to the top of the stairs. Glasses clinked. A toast was being made. Through the chatter, I heard Mom's voice, half laughing, half whispering. "She's always been a little different, you know?" The whisper clung to my brain like cobwebs in a dark attic. "She's always been a little different, you know?" Mom's voice still echoed from the night before, traveling up the stairwell like smoke. I lay on the thin mattress of the guest bed, watching the red digits of the alarm clock flip from 1:03 to 1:04. The soft chirping of crickets mingled with the hum of the porch fan outside. A moth threw itself again and again against the window pane. Persistent. Unwanted. I turned over, pulling the blanket tighter, as if it could shield me from the unease curdling in my chest. Every moment from yesterday paraded through my head like a cruel slideshow. The missing photo, the forgotten accomplishments, that plastic cutlery pile in the corner of the kitchen, my designated contribution. I squeezed my eyes shut. Different, she said. Not special, not strong, just different. By morning, my body ached like I had been running in my sleep. I pulled on a navy dress, something simple, safe. Downstairs, the smell of bacon and coffee floated in the air, but so did an unspoken tension. Everyone moved in pre-rehearsed choreography, except me. The schedule posted on the fridge read, 10:30 a.m., Legacy Brunch honoring Dad. Legacy. That word felt heavy. I wasn't part of that legacy, apparently. I was simply the one behind the camera, again. Ellie, sweetie, Mom called, not looking up from the table settings. Can you be in charge of the photos during the brunch? I nodded, swallowing the bitter taste rising in my throat. I caught a glimpse of Callista in the den with Mom, rehearsing her speech. Their heads tilted in, sharing a joke only they found funny. When they noticed me, the laughter died down. Callista gave a little wave. I smiled back, flat and practiced. I walked away thinking, I'm not in the photos? Why would I be in the speech? The backyard was set with white tables, vases of baby's breath, and mason jars with name tags. I scanned the place cards. Bryn, Callista, Dad, Mom, all front and center. Mine was near the folding chairs, next to the drink cooler. By 10:30, the sun was already pressing down like a judgment. Guests fanned themselves with napkins while Dad sat at the head of the table, proud and oblivious. When Callista stood up, the crowd gave polite applause. She looked radiant, confident in that way that made people forgive her cruelty. Thank you all for being here to celebrate our amazing father, she began, her voice syrupy with charm. His life stands on 3 pillars. Faith, perseverance, and tradition, she paused. Bryn, with her unwavering devotion and grace, embodies faith. A nod and smile toward Bryn. I'd like to think I represent perseverance. Through the tough cases, the long nights at the firm. A few chuckles. I watched Mom beam. Then she tilted her head, eyes twinkling. And the 3rd pillar? Well, I guess that one's still finding its way. Maybe they'll show up next year. Laughter. Loud, familiar laughter. I smiled too, just enough. Raised my mimosa glass. My hand shook slightly. Don't cry. I kept telling myself that. Don't cry. Not in front of them. The tribute video played next. A slideshow of old home movies, birthday parties, Christmas mornings, summer barbecues. I stood with my camera in hand, pretending to document the joy. But my eyes were locked on the screen. There was Callista's 5th grade spelling bee, Bryn's prom, Dad's retirement, even Uncle Ray's backyard pig roast from 2002. Then came the clip labeled 10th birthday, Elowen. But when it played, it was Callista's choir recital. I felt the blood drain from my face. Was it a mistake? A file misnamed? Or was I truly erased? I set the camera down gently, like handling something fragile. I murmured an excuse to Mom, going to check the lens, and slipped through the kitchen, out the sliding door into the backyard. The air was cooler in the shade, the breeze soft beneath the old oak tree. I sat on the stone bench, the same one where we used to line up for family pictures. Now the new generations posed in front of it, smiling kids in bow ties and sundresses. I watched through the leaves, unseen, like a ghost. My breath hitched. My chest tightened. I wasn't angry. Not really, just hollowed out. And then I heard footsteps. I tensed, expecting Mom's soft reprimand or Callista's smug smirk. But it was Dorian, my cousin. He stood quietly beside me, hands in his pockets, eyes on the ground. You saw the video too, didn't you? He asked softly. I nodded. Neither of us spoke for a moment. He sat down beside me, and we watched the branches sway above us, 2 shadows in the background of someone else's legacy. Yeah, I saw it. and I recorded everything. Dorian's words echoed in the still air like a match struck in a room soaked in gasoline. I stared at him, unsure whether to be relieved or horrified. His face was calm, unreadable, like someone who'd been sitting on a truth for far too long. "Why?" I asked. He looked past me, toward the house. "Because sometimes silence tells the truth better than words." We sat on that cold stone bench under the whispering branches of the old oak tree, the hum of cicadas filling in the silence. He pulled out his phone and tapped on a folder labeled Conversations. He played a clip, and my mother's voice came through clearly. "She's lucky we let her come back at all." The words landed like a slap, not shouted, not said in anger, just calm, calculated dismissal. My mother had reduced my entire existence to a reluctant allowance. I felt something unravel inside me. "I didn't record it to hurt you," Dorian said. "I started doing this after noticing things didn't line up. The stories they told, the way Callista always seemed to be the star in every version." He paused, then added, "Including the ones you weren't in." Later that night, I lay in bed, unable to sleep, Dorian's recording replaying in my head. My eyes darted around the dim room until they landed on a thought, an old shared laptop in the den. It had always been there, mostly for holiday letters or budget spreadsheets. But I remembered once, years ago, seeing Mom hurriedly close a window labeled Versions. At 3:17 a.m., I crept downstairs. The den smelled of lemon furniture polish and old printer ink. The laptop sat where it always had, dusty, forgotten, but alive. I booted it up, password prompt. I tried birthdays, our dog's name, even Callista 1. It was Bryn's baby 1992 that cracked it open. Within minutes, I found the folder, Versions. Inside, 2 files. One was titled Family Letter, Public. The other, Family Letter, for Callista. I opened the public one first. It was sweet, neutral, praising all of us in equal measure. A generic, "We're so proud of all our children," that could be posted on a church bulletin board without raising a brow. Then I opened the second. It was venom in Microsoft Word. Paragraphs about Callista's excellence, her perseverance, her duty as the moral compass of the family. Glowing mentions of Bryn's engagement and charitable work. And then, one line, near the end. The other one, still unsettled, drifts in and out of relevance. No name, just that, the other one. I was the unspeakable, the one who wasn't worth the ink. I closed the file and stared into the dim screen, watching my own reflection blur. My mind flickered back to high school. I'd been 15, Callista 17. She'd come down with strep throat days before her big choir audition. I'd offered to stand in, just for practice. The director, impressed, asked me to fill in at the district showcase. I was elated. For a brief moment, I thought maybe I had something worth seeing, until Mom pulled me aside after rehearsal. "Elowen," she said, softly but firmly, "let's not confuse people. You know your sister needs this." So I didn't go. Callista recovered in time, and she performed instead. The standing ovation that night was hers, and mine was a memory I wasn't allowed to keep. Back in the present, the weight of the years settled over my chest like wet wool. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. The next morning, I met Dorian by the shed, where he was moving some old chairs. I handed him a flash drive. He nodded. "You found it, didn't you?" "I did. And I'm done pretending." He leaned on the fence, his arms crossed. "You've been erased in slow motion. But maybe now it's time to play it in reverse." "I'm not out for revenge," I said, more to myself than to him. "No," he agreed. "But truth has its own gravity. Let them feel the pull." We both knew what he meant. Back in the guest room, I quietly placed the laptop into my suitcase beneath a few sweaters and my worn copy of Jane Eyre. My fingers hovered above the zipper before I closed it shut. There was no more running, no more waiting for an invitation. They could ignore the woman who came home, but not the one who showed up next. The invitation hadn't come directly, but I knew better than to wait for one. Aunt Myra's house, perched regally atop a gentle Asheville slope, was glowing like a postcard in the golden light of dusk. Everyone knew the family dinners she hosted were the pinnacle of any reunion, an unofficial summit of status, stories, and subtle slights. I wasn't going to miss it. I wore the navy blue dress I'd packed for something respectable but not invisible. It was plain enough to fly under Callista's radar, but sharp enough to remind me I still had edges. My heels clicked purposefully on the flagstone walkway as I approached the front door, rehearsing in my head the calm responses I'd give when someone feigned surprise at my presence. As expected, Mom opened the door with a smile that flickered like a faulty light bulb. "Oh, we thought you'd be too tired after flying in yesterday." That was the first blow, not hard enough to bruise, but designed to make me hesitate. "Rested enough," I replied with a polite nod, stepping past her into the candlelit warmth of the house. Every room glowed with curated charm, polished silverware, fragrant roasts, the clink of wine glasses, and polished laughter. I felt like a draft sneaking through a sealed window. The dining room was already buzzing. Names scribbled in calligraphy marked each place setting. I scanned quickly. Callista, Bryn, Uncle Harold, no Elowen. A second scan revealed a lonely stool at the end, by the kitchen door where the staff drifted in and out with trays. A folding card said, Ellie, a nickname I hadn't used since junior high. I sat anyway. Dinner moved forward like a parade I wasn't part of. Toasts, stories, Callista's impressive client list, Bryn's wedding updates. When I did speak, it was like tossing a pebble into a roaring river, heard by no one, lost in the current. Then Callista clinked her wine glass. It rang sharp and sudden, commanding the room. "You know," she began, smile too wide to be genuine, "it's always the ones who don't contribute who want the biggest slice of legacy." The room hushed. Even the silverware paused. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice low and level, rehearsed. Mom swooped in like she always did, smoothing over poison with sugar. "She's just saying, you've chosen a different path, honey." Dorian shifted in his seat. I took a breath. "And you've chosen to erase me, but I still exist." You could feel the table groan under the weight of what I'd just said. Aunt Myra cleared her throat and said perhaps I'd like some air, maybe take my plate outside for a breather. I didn't move. "You've spent decades controlling the narrative," I said calmly. "I'm just here to eat." Eyes widened. Callista's mouth twitched. "You're making a scene." "Maybe a scene is what you all need." No one moved. No one reached for their wine. I chewed another bite of lamb, slowly, defiantly. The clatter of plates and silver resumed eventually, like a storm deciding whether to pass or stay. Later, in the kitchen, as I filled a glass with water, Dorian approached. "I've never seen you stand that tall before," he said quietly. My hands trembled. "Neither have I." The room was settling, dessert making its way to the table. I returned to my seat as if I'd never left. Then, as slices of peach cobbler were passed down, I raised my glass. "To family," I said, looking directly at Mom, "and to the parts of it that refuse to disappear." There was a beat of silence, a gasp or two. Mom dropped her spoon, the clatter echoing across the table. The morning light filtered through the gauzy curtains, but the house remained still. Too still. The usual clatter of pans, the low hum of Aunt Myra's coffee pot, the shrill giggles of nieces and nephews. It was all absent. In its place was a silence that settled over everything like dust on untouched shelves. I sat on the porch with a cup of lukewarm tea, letting the quiet speak louder than words. From the corner of my eye, I saw Dorian step outside, his hands in his pockets, his stance hesitant. He didn't say anything, but he gave me a nod, small, firm, grounding. He was the only person in that house who didn't look through me like fogged glass. I barely had time to finish my tea before Callista came storming out of the house, her heels crunching over the gravel path to the garden. She didn't greet me, didn't even blink. "You think you're brave now?" she hissed. "Toasting like some martyr at dinner? Acting like we've all wronged you?" I looked up, steady. I didn't act. I existed. There's a difference. Her hand trembled as she held up a stapled paper. I didn't need to see the title to know what it was. The short story I published years ago. Fiction, inspired by truth. Truth, softened by fiction. You made him look weak, she said. You wrote our father as if he didn't protect this family. I wrote how it felt to grow up unnoticed, I interrupted, not bothering to stand. That's not the same as accusation, she scoffed. He loved you more than you deserved. I stood now, slowly, deliberately. Maybe he loved the version of me you told him about. The color drained from her face. We stared at each other in a silence packed with history, decades of unfair comparisons, hushed conversations, the way she always needed the spotlight, and I always let her have it. Why do you think he never talked about you? She bit out. I didn't flinch. Because it was easier to pretend I didn't disappoint him if he didn't have to remember me. Something behind her eyes cracked. She spun and marched back inside, leaving the paper fluttering to the ground like an accusation too tired to land. At brunch, the energy was brittle, forks clicked against plates. I sat where I pleased. Mom, dressed in lavender with a string of pearls that had always been reserved for Callista's wedding, offered a practiced smile. You'll need to head to the airport by 1, right? Still the 4 p.m. flight? I buttered my toast with care. I'm not leaving today. Silence. No one breathed. I booked a place nearby, just for a week. Bryn's husband dropped his fork. Callista blinked so slowly I thought she might disappear into her own contempt. For Dad, I said. And for me. I didn't offer more. I didn't need to. I'd drawn my line in the dust and dared anyone to sweep it away. That evening, when I returned to the guest room, I found a notebook on my suitcase. Old, leather-bound. A scrap of duct tape across the front with my name on it, scrawled in Dorian's familiar hand. I sat down, heart drumming low in my throat. Inside were clipped passages from Dad's journals, lines about stocks, lawn repairs, sermon notes. And then, she sees what others won't. One day they'll need her vision. And another, dated just a few months before his passing. She's like the tide, quiet but powerful. They don't see her now. They will. My throat tightened. I ran my fingers across the ink as if that might let me touch the man I never got to confront properly, or thank, or forgive. Downstairs, the house had gone dim. Most had retired early. I crept down for a glass of water and stopped short. Mom sat at the kitchen table, alone. A glass of red wine swirled slowly in her hand. She didn't look up. If you choose to stay, she said, don't expect to be part of anything we build moving forward. I stepped closer, not out of challenge, but clarity. Maybe I'm not meant to fit in what you're building. She finally looked at me. Her eyes, once so soft when I brought home spelling bee trophies, were flinty now. You'd better mean that. I met her gaze, steady as ever. I do. Dorian found me sitting. I turned to him slowly, the silence between us stretching. What? He looked over his shoulder, checking for wandering ears, then gesture. We slipped into the den. Dad's old space, long untouched by anyone but Mom. Dorian led me to the built-in CA. He removed the lid and tilted it, empty. I felt my knees wobble. What is this? I asked Mom about it once. She said I closed my eyes, the weight of grief crashing down that night, long after the lights had gone out and only the hum of the "it was locked." I stood staring at it until a thought sparked. I remembered the sewing kit in Mom's closet. She always kept spare K. I slipped the key into the lock, my hands trembling. The drawer slid open with there it was. An envelope, yellowed with age, labeled in my father's hand. Whoa, I sat on the floor and unfolded Elowen. If you're reading this, you've come back, and that means more than I can ever say aloud. I didn't protect you enough. I let others dictate how we spoke about you, and I hate myself for it. If your mother continues to control my story, know that I never agreed. I wanted you to have your place, your truth. I left instructions for a small plot by the lake. You deserve to know where I hope to rest. I hope someone tells you what I couldn't. My hands shook as I folded the letter. My eyes were wet before I realized I was crying. This was the first time in years I'd heard his voice, his real voice. Morning came like a blade, slicing through the calm. At breakfast, I waited until everyone had gathered, bowls clinking, idle chatter floating. "Where are Dad's ashes?" I asked quietly. Mom's spoon paused mid-air. Her expression barely flickered. "That's not your business anymore." I pulled the letter from my back pocket and laid it on the table. The air turned to stone. Callista stood, arms crossed. "You're exploiting a man who gave you everything." "No," I said, eyes locked on Mom. "I'm reclaiming the part of him you tried to hide from me." Her smile thinned into something sharp. "If you use that letter in any way, I will take legal action. Defamation, emotional distress, you name it." Callista leaned in. "You don't belong in his legacy." I stood. My voice was barely more than a whisper, but steady. "He didn't write that letter to you." Neither of them responded. I turned and walked away. Later that afternoon, tucked into my suitcase, I found a notebook. Dorian had slipped it there. Inside were photocopied pages from Dad's journals. One entry read, "She sees what others won't. One day they'll need her vision." The ink blurred under my tears, and maybe they already do. That night, I scrolled through my contacts, heart racing. When I found the name, I hesitated for only a breath. "Hi. My name is Elowen Winters. Yes, I'm his daughter. And I think I need to talk to you." When I returned from the lawyer's office, the house felt unusually still. The late afternoon sun cast sharp angles across the porch, and the screen door creaked a second longer than it should have before snapping shut behind me. I dropped my keys on the entry table and paused. Voices, faint, too rehearsed, drifted in from the living room. I turned the corner and stopped cold. Every chair was taken. Callista sat in the center, her cheeks streaked with tears, holding a printed sheaf of papers like they were sacred scripture. My mother sat beside her, stony-faced. Bryn, Aunt Myra, even Dorian, all there. A family circle, one I wasn't invited to. Callista's voice cracked as she finished. She only came back to dig into Dad's money. The room turned to me in unison. "What is this?" I asked. Mom smoothed her skirt, not meeting my eyes. "Just airing some concerns." Callista stood. "You should be honest for once, Elowen. You've been struggling, haven't you?" She passed out sheets from the stack, my resume, outdated and incomplete, screenshots of past due bills, articles quoting me on creative struggles from years ago. "She's drowning in debt," Callista said, venom wrapped in faux pity. "She came here with a suitcase full of schemes." My jaw clenched. Even Dorian looked at me differently now, less brother, more juror. "You dug up my past to protect Dad?" I asked quietly. "Or just to humiliate me?" Callista's face twisted. "You've never belonged to this family." The silence that followed wasn't surprise. It was silent agreement. I almost laughed. "You're right," I said. "I stopped trying to belong the day I realized this family only embraces perfection, even if it's fake." Mom stood then, her expression hardening. "You've said enough," she snapped. "I sent the lawyer a recording of our conversation. Your words, Elowen, your true colors." She pulled up an email on her phone and pressed play. My voice echoed out but warped. Edited. "I don't care about his ashes. I just want what's mine." My breath caught. "I never said that," I whispered. "You did," Mom insisted. "You just don't remember how it sounds when the truth's exposed." But I remembered that night. Half a sentence, taken from a longer thought, lifted and cut to destroy me. "You're fabricating evidence now?" My voice shook, but not from fear, from fury. "You've tried to erase the parts of me that don't fit your story. I'm done fitting. I'll stand outside your frame if I have to." Callista stepped forward, smirking. "Then be ready to stand alone." I walked upstairs without another word, the weight of betrayal heavy on my shoulders, but strangely clarifying. At my desk, I unfolded Dad's letter, the one they hadn't read and couldn't rewrite. I scanned every page carefully, time-stamping the document and attaching a sworn affidavit. Subject line: "This is the truth he left behind." I hit send. Then I whispered to the empty room, "You wanted a voice, Dad. Let's begin." The dining room had been transformed. The long oak table gleamed under a soft glow of overhead light, place settings neatly arranged with a kind of ceremony that hadn't existed all week. But beneath the polished silverware and folded linen napkins was something else, something palpable and heavy. I walked in holding the printed letter from Dad, its corners slightly curled from how many times I'd clutched it in my hands. Dorian stood just a step behind me, a quiet pillar of support. Everyone was seated already, Mom at the head, Callista beside her, Bryn and the others down the row. Their chatter dimmed the moment I crossed the threshold. I stood at my seat but didn't sit. "Before we begin," I said, my voice steady but low, "I have something he meant you all to see." Mom's eyes narrowed. Callista exhaled loudly and looked away. I pulled out my phone, tapped play, and placed it in the center of the table. Dorian had helped me record a clean reading of the letter in Dad's own handwriting. His voice wasn't there, but his words were clear, deliberate, unshakable. "If your mother crafts my final story, no, I never agreed. Elowen sees what others won't. She speaks what I couldn't. If she reads this, it means she came back. And I need you to hear her." Silence dropped like a curtain. The clink of someone's fork halted mid-air. Mom didn't blink. Callista's hand trembled slightly over her glass. Even Bryn, who had stayed relatively neutral, stared at her lap like the table had vanished entirely. Then, from the far end, Uncle Thaddeus cleared his throat. His voice was rough, almost unsure. "Elowen, am sorry." Heads turned. Mine snapped to him. I hadn't even realized he was there, hunched at the end with his napkin still in his lap. "I didn't know about the letter," he continued, softer now. "But I should have seen what was right in front of me. I've overlooked things, for years." For a beat, no one breathed. "I appreciate that," I said, voice catching slightly. "Thank you." The dam cracked. Not a flood, but a shift. Tension thinned in the air. The kind of shift you feel in your chest before a storm passes. I turned to Mom, whose face remained carved from stone. "You tried to erase me," I said, not with venom, just the plain truth. "I needed him, and now I have him, his words, his wishes. They don't vanish just because you don't agree." Callista stood sharply, her chair screeching. "You think a letter changes everything?" "No," I replied. "But it starts the conversation we never had, the one he wanted us to have." I turned back to the table. "I'm not asking to rewrite the past. I'm asking to be seen in the present. I don't need permission. I need acknowledgement." Bryn blinked rapidly, clearly fighting emotion. One cousin looked down, another stirred their water glass. It wasn't a tidal wave of acceptance, but it was movement. That's all I'd ever needed. The evening stumbled on. Plates were cleared, small conversations resumed, clunky and half-hearted, but happening. As the dessert was brought out, Dorian stood. He raised his glass, eyes scanning the room before landing on me. "To Elowen, the part of our family we nearly lost." There was hesitation. Then the soft clinks of glass meeting glass and murmured agreement. I lifted mine, not for them, not even for Dad, but for the version of myself who'd been told to sit quietly in the corner of her own family. I saw her now, and she wasn't disappearing. I woke before dawn, long before the house stirred with morning chatter. The air was still, unruffled by the day's plans. I held the leather folder in my hands, Dad's letter that should have reached me years ago but never did. I stepped onto the back porch, the swing creaking softly beneath me, and unfolded the paper again. With trembling fingers, I began to read aloud. "I know you may feel alone, but you remind me there's more to our name than perfection." The words hung in the misty morning light. I closed my eyes and inhaled, letting the ache of paths untraveled settle into quiet resolve. For years I'd felt like an echo, reverberating but never seen. This letter felt like a hand squeezing mine, bridging that divide. Soft vocal folds tightened behind me. I turned to see my niece standing hesitantly at the door, barefoot, her mud-stained dress slipping off one shoulder. She'd been told to stay inside, but here she was, as if she'd sensed the current shift in our world. "Aunt Elowen," she said softly, with that intensity children have when speaking truths adults avoid. "I'm glad you're here. Grandma says you're not someone to trust, but I know you love Daddy." The weight of that moment shifted something in my chest. I held my breath, my heart a flicker of hope. I crouched to her level and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Thank you for staying," I whispered back. She blinked and scampered away, leaving me with a quiet that felt softer, kinder. I stayed there until the sun edged Hoger across the yard, then went back inside. Passing through the dim hallway to the living room, I saw it, the urn on the mantel, placed beside Dad's smiling photo. It was there, still there, but not hidden anymore. I stood before it, words unsaid forming in the hush. I didn't reach to touch it. Instead, I just stood, letting the moment settle. No applause, no declaration, just a slow-building presence that wasn't there before. My presence, rightful and grounded. The room felt different now, not because electricity had changed, but because truth had settled. My niece appeared again, towering shorter than me, but holding something immense. She slipped quietly behind me and tugged my sleeve. "Thank you for not giving up on us," she whispered. I paused. Time felt elastic for a moment, stretching to include all the moments that had been broken and now mending. I placed a gentle hand over hers. Her fingers curled against mine, delicate, resolute. In that moment I realized, we may come from splintered places, but some truths, once found, can't be erased. And some connections, begin anew, bind us stronger than any pushed-away part of our past. The next morning I woke to the buzz of my phone on the nightstand. A new email sat waiting. Subject line: Evidence regarding Elowen Brooks. It was forwarded by Mom. I opened it with a sick heaviness already coiled in my chest. There it was, the distorted recording she had sent to Dad's estate lawyer. My own voice, chopped apart, stitched back together into something poisonous. I don't care about his ashes. I just want what's mine. I knew I had never said those words. Not like that. But hearing my voice twisted into betrayal still pierced deeper than shrapnel ever had. In uniform, I'd stood against insurgents with rifles. Here, I was unarmed, facing my own mother. Later that afternoon, the lawyer's voice came steady through the phone, carrying something Mom could not bury. "Elowen," he said, "your father included a clause in the will that wasn't disclosed to you. It states explicitly that his daughter must be acknowledged publicly at all family gatherings in order for the inheritance to be complete. Your mother omitted this copy, but it exists, signed and notarized. Legally, it stands." I sank back in the chair, gripping the armrest. Dad. Even in death, he had found a way to hand me back a place at the table. Not money, not property, acknowledgement. His last act was to force their eyes to see me. That evening, I sat at the desk in the den where his letters had been kept. The house was quiet except for the tick of the old wall clock. One by one, I pulled together the proof: his handwritten letter, Dorian's audio clips, my own published essays, and now the lawyer's revelation. I wasn't building a case for revenge. This was about restoring truth, about finally cutting through years of silence with evidence no one could erase. I thought of the oath I had once sworn in uniform, to protect and defend. Tonight, I was protecting my own name. When I walked into the living room, Mom and Callista were waiting. Their faces tightened the air like barbed wire. "I spoke to the lawyer," I said quietly. "Dad's will says I must be acknowledged. I expect what was promised." Callista's face flushed, her jaw tight. "How could you?" I held her gaze, voice steady as steel. "By being here. by honoring his wishes. That's how. There was no shouting, no theatrics, just a silence that pressed against the walls and my refusal to bow. Hours later, as the house dimmed into night, I wandered the hallway. My steps stopped before the wall of framed photos. A new one caught my eye. Fresh glass, fresh ink. It was the sisters, all of us. And this time I was there, dead center. Beneath the frame, a small brass plate read, "We are all part of this legacy." I touched the edge of the frame, breath shaking but steady. The war wasn't over, but the tide had shifted. Dad, I thought. You did it. You gave me back my seat. The words from last night still lingered in my chest. We are all part of this legacy. By the time the afternoon sun slipped across the old oak floors, I found myself lingering in the study. Dad's study. Dust motes floated in the air like tiny planets suspended in orbit. That was when the door creaked open. Maribel, quiet as ever, stood there with a tray of herbal tea. She didn't say anything at first. She just looked at me with those dark, steady eyes that had watched me grow up. Before I could offer a word, she set the tray down and wrapped me in her arms. It wasn't the kind of polite hug you give at reunions. It was solid, grounding, like she was pressing back the years of silence with nothing more than warmth. My throat tightened. For a moment, I wasn't the outcast daughter. I was simply someone who belonged. We sat in the hush of the study, the clock ticking softly. I poured the tea and Maribel pointed at Dad's portrait on the desk. Her voice was low, careful, but every syllable carried weight. He always knew he needed you beside him. I've seen it. The words landed deeper than I expected. I didn't need her to keep going. She had given me more in a single sentence than my family had in years. Validation without condition. I stared at Dad's photo, the sharp jawline, the faint smirk he wore whenever he believed he was right. Maybe for the first time since his passing, I let myself believe he really had seen me all along. Later, I slipped out to the backyard garden. The air was thick with honeysuckle and damp soil. I pressed my palms into the earth and breathed. For so long, I'd been carrying this need, this hunger for acceptance that my family never gave. Out here, I realized I didn't need it. Healing didn't roar, it whispered. It didn't demand apologies, it offered release. Maybe grace was less about forgiving them and more about letting go of the hate I had been nursing like a wound. That evening, I cooked with Maribel and Dorian. Nothing fancy, just Dad's favorite chili recipe. The onions made our eyes water, and Dorian tried too hard not to cry over them. For the first time in days, laughter drifted through the kitchen. We didn't talk about wills or ashes or ultimatums. Just stories. Small, ordinary stories. Dad trying to fix the old lawnmower and making it worse. Maribel sneaking us cookies when Mom wasn't looking. It was the closest thing to peace I'd felt since coming back. After dinner, I helped Maribel hang a small family photo in the hallway. My hand brushed hers as we straightened the frame. She kept her palm over mine, firm and deliberate. In that slow, unguarded moment, I heard her whisper, soft enough for only me, "We wanted you." We just didn't know how to say it. The click of a phone camera snapped nearby, Dorian capturing the moment without asking. This time, I didn't flinch from the lens. For the first time in years, I felt like maybe, just maybe, the bridge between me and this house hadn't burned completely. It had simply been waiting for me to walk across in my own time. The house was quiet when I woke, the kind of silence that hums with unfinished business. Morning light spilled across the photo on the hallway wall, the one with me, finally, standing in the center. For the first time, it didn't feel like a mistake. It felt like proof. On the patio, coffee warm between my palms, I answered the lawyer's call. His voice was calm but resolute. "The clause stands. Your presence must be acknowledged. Everything will be recorded." I closed my eyes and let out a long breath, the kind that carries years of waiting. By mid-morning, they had gathered in the living room. Not my summons, theirs. A final conversation, they called it. I stood before them, not trembling this time. In my hands, Dad's letter, the urn, and the framed photo. 3 anchors of truth. I didn't come back for pity, I said, voice steady. I came back for truth. The air shifted, brittle as glass. I read aloud Dad's words one last time. If she returns, she is to be seen. She is to be named. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. I looked at my mother, her hands knotted in her lap. This isn't about winning. This is about existing. And I do. The lawyer's documents had confirmed it. My place was not theirs to erase. Callista's gaze fell to the floor. For once, she had no script. My mother's shoulders stiffened, but the fight had drained out. The room was no longer hers. Later, I walked the hallway alone. My fingers brushed against the frame of the photo again. This time, I let myself smile. No applause, no cheers, just stillness, earned and unbreakable. Maribel found me by the mantel. She placed a hand on mine, over the urn. Peace, she whispered. Not fragile, not fleeting, just peace. By evening, my suitcase waited at the door. I lingered a moment, hand on the knob. I'm going home, I whispered, not to disappear, but to write what comes next. The door closed behind me with a soft click, and for the first time in years, I felt the ground beneath my feet belong to me. When I look back on everything I shared, I realize this story was never just about my family. It was about finding my own voice when others tried to silence it. Maybe you've been overlooked, dismissed, or told you don't belong. I want you to know, your worth is not decided by anyone else. It's written into who you are. Life in America often tells us to measure success by titles, money, or recognition, but I've learned that real strength comes from refusing to disappear. It comes from standing up quietly, even when your hands shake, and saying, I matter. That's a lesson I wish I had understood sooner, and one I hope you carry with you. So let me ask you, have you ever felt invisible in your own family, workplace, or community? What did you do to rise above it? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. And if this video touched your heart, type a 1 below, or tell me where you're watching from. If it didn't connect with you, tell me why. I welcome your honesty. And don't forget, if you want more stories like this, filled with lessons and reflections that reach into real life, please hit the subscribe button. Your voice matters here too, and together we can keep building conversations that truly count.